The Dominion had ruled the Orion arm of the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 400 star systems, and their warships numbered in the tens of thousands. Every species they encountered either submitted to their rule or was crushed beneath their military might. They had never known defeat, and they had long since forgotten what it meant to fear another civilization. When their survey ships first detected the small blue world called Earth, they found it mildly amusing. Here was a species that had barely learned to travel between stars. Humans had established only 3 colony worlds in a century of space exploration. They possessed no faster-than-light weapons, no energy shields worthy of the name, and no understanding of the true scope of galactic civilization. To the ancient, humanity was little more than infants stumbling through a universe they could not possibly comprehend. High Commander was given the honor of bringing humanity into the Dominion's fold. He arrived at the human colony of New Eden with a diplomatic fleet of 20 warships, each one capable of reducing a continent to glass. They were tall beings, nearly 8 feet in height, with crystalline skin that shifted colors according to their emotional state. They considered themselves the rightful shepherds of all lesser species, and they expected humanity to recognize this truth immediately. Ambassador Cole represented humanity at the negotiations. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen decades of difficult diplomacy. Beside her stood Captain Brooks, her military advisor and a veteran of human conflicts that they knew nothing about. Together, they boarded the flagship to meet with High Commander. The meeting chamber was designed to intimidate. Massive pillars of living crystal rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Officers lined the walls, their crystalline bodies glowing with soft light. Himself sat upon an elevated throne, looking down at the 2 humans as one might regard insects that had wandered into a palace. Spoke first, his voice resonating through translation devices. He welcomed the human representatives to what he called the beginning of their species' true history. He explained that the Dominion offered humanity a generous choice. They could accept protectorate status, surrendering their military vessels and paying reasonable tribute to the Dominion. In exchange, they would receive protection and guidance from a civilization that had mastered the stars when humans still lived in caves. The alternative, said with a slight smile, was something he hoped the humans would be wise enough to avoid. Cole listened without expression. When finished, she stood and addressed him with the same calm dignity she had shown throughout. She thanked the High Commander for his offer and acknowledged the great age and accomplishment of the civilization. However, she continued, humanity would not surrender its sovereignty to any power in the galaxy. Instead, she proposed a mutual defense treaty between equals, a partnership that would benefit both species. The chamber erupted in laughter. Officers clicked their crystalline fingers together in their species' expression of amusement. Skin flashed bright orange, the color of contempt and mockery. He leaned forward on his throne and spoke slowly, as if explaining something to a very small child. He told the ambassador that she did not seem to understand the situation. Humanity was not being offered a choice between 2 equal options. They were being offered a choice between submission and destruction. They had conquered 1,000 species across 10,000 years. What could humans possibly offer as equals? Their primitive ships, their laughable weapons, their brief little lives. Captain Brooks stepped forward. His voice was quiet but steady as he reminded the High Commander that they had conquered species that were already advanced when they arrived. Perhaps they had forgotten what it meant to face a species that had survived true hardship. Earth, he explained, was what humans called a death world. Every creature on it had evolved to kill or be killed. Humanity had clawed its way to the top of that world's food chain through patience, cunning, and an absolute refusal to die quietly. Dismissed the captain's words with a wave of his crystalline hand. He had heard such boasts before, from 100 species that now served the Dominion faithfully. He gave humanity 1 standard month to reconsider. When the Dominion fleet returned, he expected a formal surrender. If they did not receive one, New Eden would serve as an example to the rest of human civilization. The delegation departed that same day. As their ships climbed toward orbit, spoke with his officers about the coming campaign. He estimated that breaking humanity would require perhaps a single rotation of their. These children, he said with amusement, had no concept of what real power looked like. They would learn their place soon enough. Cole watched the ships disappear from the colony's tracking screens. She turned to Captain Brooks and asked him directly if they were truly ready for what was coming. Brooks nodded slowly. He told her that humanity had been preparing for this possibility ever since first contact with alien life 5 years ago. They had studied every species they encountered and learned that the galaxy was not a friendly place. Earth's governments had quietly developed something called the Shadow Protocol, a defense strategy designed for exactly this situation. Asked what the protocol involved, Brooks smiled slightly and told her that they were about to discover something important about human beings. When humans could not match an enemy in strength, they found other ways to win. They expected a war of fleets and armies, the kind of war they had always fought. They would not get one. Across New Eden, evacuation orders went out to the civilian population. Underground shelters that had been built in secret began receiving families and essential personnel. On the surface, human soldiers moved into positions they had prepared over years of quiet work, hidden bunkers and tunnel networks that did not appear on any official maps. Colonel Hayes took command of the ground defense forces. He gathered his officers and explained their orders. They would not try to hold territory against them. They would not form battle lines or defend fixed positions. Instead, they would do what humans had always done when facing a stronger enemy. They would disappear into the shadows and strike from the darkness. They would make the fear every step they took on human soil. The soldiers understood. Many of them had studied Earth's military history, the long centuries of guerrilla warfare and unconventional tactics that humans had perfected against each other. Now they would teach those lessons to an empire that had never faced such an enemy. High Commander spent the following weeks preparing his invasion force. He assembled the Third Expansion Fleet, 200 warships carrying 50,000 of the Dominion's finest soldiers. Victory was so certain that he invited observers from allied species to witness the conquest. None of them understood what was waiting for them on New Eden. None of them could imagine what humans were capable of when they had no choice but to fight. The children of Earth were about to remind the galaxy why their ancestors had survived a world that tried to kill them every single day. The lesson would be one they would never forget. The Third Expansion Fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel exactly 1 month after High Commander had delivered his ultimatum. 200 warships filled the space around New Eden, their crystalline hulls gleaming in the light of the system's star. 50,000 soldiers waited in their transport vessels, eager to demonstrate the might of the Dominion to these primitive humans. Broadcast his demands across every frequency the humans might receive. He announced that the time for discussion had ended. Humanity would surrender unconditionally within 1 standard hour, or the bombardment would begin. He expected the colonists to panic, to beg for mercy, to realize at last how foolish their resistance had been. The response came from Colonial Governor. Her voice was calm and measured as she informed the High Commander that New Eden would not surrender. She stated that all civilian populations had been moved to protected locations and that any attack on the colony would be met with appropriate response. She wished the fleet a pleasant day and ended the transmission. His crystalline skin flickered with irritation. These humans seemed incapable of understanding their situation. He considered orbital bombardment but decided against it. The Dominion Council wanted prisoners and resources, not a destroyed world. Besides, crushing the human defenders in ground combat would send a stronger message to the rest of their species. The invasion began at dawn on the colony's primary continent. Landing craft descended through clear skies, carrying the first wave of 20,000 soldiers. They touched down in the agricultural zones surrounding the main settlement, vast fields of grain and vegetables that stretched toward distant mountains. Sensors showed fewer than 3,000 human defenders scattered across the region. This would not be a battle, it would be a demonstration. Troops moved out in perfect formation. Their officers communicated through neural links that allowed instantaneous coordination across vast distances. Every soldier knew exactly where every other soldier was at every moment. Their weapons were the finest in the galaxy, plasma rifles capable of burning through any armor humanity possessed. They advanced with absolute confidence. For the first hour, they encountered nothing. The agricultural facilities they inspected were empty. The roads they marched along were deserted. Drone scouts showed no signs of human military activity anywhere in the region. Some officers began to wonder if the humans had simply fled, abandoning their colony without a fight. Then the disappearances started. A patrol of 12 soldiers entered a grain processing facility to search for hidden defenders. Their neural links showed them moving through the building in standard formation. Then, one by one, the signals simply stopped. When reinforcements arrived, they found only empty armor scattered across the floor. No bodies, no blood, no signs of any struggle at all. Received the report with confusion rather than concern. He ordered the patrol's last known location thoroughly searched. Perhaps the humans had some kind of disintegration weapon, something that could vaporize organic matter while leaving equipment intact. It was primitive thinking, but these humans were primitive creatures. More reports came in throughout the morning. A supply convoy of 40 troops vanished on a road between two hills. Scout drones tracked them until they entered a small valley, and then the drones themselves stopped transmitting. A communications team setting up relay equipment disappeared from a hilltop in broad daylight. Their equipment remained, still powered on, still broadcasting to an empty frequency. By midday, nearly 500 soldiers had simply ceased to exist. Ground commanders demanded answers from intelligence officers who had none to give. Aerial surveillance showed nothing unusual. Thermal imaging detected no human forces anywhere near the disappearance sites. It was as if the soldiers were being swallowed by the land itself. Colonel Hayes watched the positions from a command center buried 50 meters underground. Around him, screens displayed thermal signatures and movement patterns tracked by hidden sensors scattered across the colony. His soldiers moved through tunnel networks that connected every major structure, through drainage systems designed for exactly this purpose, through the tall crops that provided perfect concealment. The humans wore suits that masked their heat signatures. They communicated through physical signals and written messages, nothing electronic that could be intercepted. They moved in small teams of 4 or 5, emerging from the ground, completing their missions, and disappearing again before they could react. Hayes gave simple orders: take them quietly. No weapons fire unless absolutely necessary. Make them wonder, make them fear. The prisoners were moved through the tunnels to holding facilities miles from any combat zone. They were sedated with compounds that human scientists had developed specifically for physiology. The research had taken years, conducted on biological samples acquired through means they would never know about. By the time the prisoners woke, they would be aboard ships far from New Eden. As darkness fell on the first day, the disappearance count reached 2,000. Commanders ordered their troops to form defensive positions, to stay in large groups, to report any movement immediately. The confidence of the morning had been replaced by uncertainty that bordered on fear. Received updates throughout the night. Another 300 gone before midnight. A forward command post of 60 soldiers vanished while surrounded by sensor drones and defensive turrets. The sensors recorded nothing. The turrets never fired. One moment the soldiers were there, and the next moment they were not. Some troops began to whisper about human sorcery, about demons that could walk through walls and steal souls. Officers tried to restore discipline, but the fear was spreading faster than orders could contain it. These humans did not fight like any enemy they had ever faced. They did not fight at all, in any way the soldiers understood. They simply erased their enemies and left no trace behind. Vice Commander approached with growing concern. She reported that ground force morale was collapsing. Soldiers were refusing to advance. Some units had begun firing at shadows. She recommended pulling back to the landing zones and reassessing their strategy. Refused. Retreat was not something the Dominion did. He ordered reinforcements to the surface, another 10,000 troops to replace those who had vanished. He ordered his warships to begin targeted strikes on any structure that might hide human forces. He would burn this colony to ash before he would admit that humans had made him afraid. But deep in his command center, surrounded by guards and protected by the finest security in the galaxy, High Commander found himself looking at shadows with new attention. Somewhere on the planet below, human soldiers were watching, waiting, planning. And there was nothing he could do to stop them. The third day of the invasion brought rain to New Eden, thick sheets of water that reduced visibility to mere meters. The ground forces had consolidated into fortified camps, abandoning their advance across the colony in favor of defensive positions they believed they could hold. They were wrong. Colonel Hayes had studied rainfall patterns on New Eden for 3 years. He knew exactly when the seasonal storms would arrive and had planned the next phase of operations around them. The rain masked sound, disrupted sensors, and turned the ground into mud that slowed their heavy equipment. For humans equipped with lightweight gear and intimate knowledge of the terrain, the storm was a gift. The largest camp held 4,000 soldiers protected by energy barriers and automated defense turrets. They had established overlapping fields of fire and constant patrol rotations. Officers assured their troops that nothing could penetrate such defenses. At midnight, the camp's power systems failed without explanation. The energy barriers flickered and died. The turrets went silent. When dawn came, the camp was empty. 4,000 soldiers had vanished overnight along with every piece of portable equipment they carried. Only the heaviest vehicles remained, their access panels open, their control systems removed. Investigators found no footprints in the mud, no signs of struggle, nothing at all to explain what had happened. High Commander received the news in silence. His crystalline skin had shifted to a pale shade that his officers had never seen before. He ordered all remaining ground forces to withdraw to the primary landing zone and prepare for evacuation. For the first time in his military career, was pulling back from a conquest. But the humans were not finished. Believed that his fleet was safe in orbit. Warships possessed the most advanced shields in known space, capable of withstanding bombardment from entire fleets. Their point defense systems could track and destroy thousands of incoming projectiles per second. No enemy had ever successfully boarded a vessel in the history of the Dominion. Admiral Price arrived in the system with the human relief fleet on the 4th day. 30 ships emerged from faster-than-light travel, a force so small that sensors initially classified them as a scouting party. Price broadcast a message to the fleet, her voice calm and professional. She informed High Commander that humanity was prepared to negotiate an end to hostilities. She explained that the soldiers and crew who had disappeared were alive and unharmed, held in secure facilities until the Dominion agreed to withdraw. She offered a simple exchange. They would leave human space and recognize human sovereignty. In return, all prisoners would be released without conditions. Rejected the offer with contempt. He told the human admiral that her 30 ships would be destroyed within minutes, and then the Dominion would burn every human world until their species understood the cost of defiance. His 200 warships began moving into attack formation. Price smiled slightly and gave a single order. The human fleet scattered. Tactical officers watched in confusion as the human vessels broke formation and accelerated in random directions. They did not flee the system. Instead, they began weaving between the ships in patterns that seemed completely chaotic. Targeting computers struggled to lock onto vessels that refused to move in predictable ways. In the confusion, no one noticed the small objects that detached from the human ships. They were barely larger than a person, painted black, running on minimal power. They drifted through the formation like debris, attracting no attention from sensors programmed to identify threats by size and energy signature. The first ship to fall was the cruiser Eternal Light. Her captain reported unusual readings from the outer hull, small vibrations that might indicate micrometeorite impacts. Engineers were dispatched to investigate. They never reported back. Over the following hour, compartment after compartment went silent. Crew members stopped responding to communications. When the bridge finally went dark, 800 had vanished from a ship whose shields had never been breached. Boarding pods. The humans had developed boarding pods small enough to evade detection and equipped with cutting tools that could penetrate hull plating. Each pod carried a team of 4 human soldiers, specialists trained for exactly this kind of operation. They moved through the alien ships like ghosts, using the same tactics that had proven so effective on the ground. Panic spread through the fleet as more ships went dark. The destroyer Crimson Dawn, the carrier Endless Victory, the battlecruiser Pride of. One by one, vessels fell silent, their crews disappearing without a single distress call or weapons discharge. By midnight, 11 ships had been taken. Ordered his fleet to maximum alert. Every corridor was patrolled. Every access point was guarded. Soldiers stood watch in engineering sections and cargo bays and maintenance tunnels. But the disappearances continued. Humans seemed to materialize from nowhere, strike without sound, and vanish before anyone could respond. Vice Commander found staring out the viewport of his flagship, watching another cruiser go dark in the distance. She reported that fleet morale had collapsed. Captains were requesting permission to withdraw from the system. Some ships had already begun moving toward the fleet's edge, hopping to escape whatever was hunting them. Asked how this was possible, they had conquered 1,000 species. They had never encountered an enemy they could not defeat through superior firepower and discipline. How could these primitive humans, these children who had barely discovered space travel, reduce the mightiest fleet in the galaxy to terrified prey? Had no answer. She could only report the facts. 12,000 soldiers and crew had now vanished. The ground invasion had failed completely. The fleet was losing ships faster than they could coordinate defenses. Whatever the humans were doing, the Dominion had no counter for it. A communication request appeared on the bridge displays. Colonel Hayes, calling from somewhere on the surface of New Eden, had somehow accessed military frequencies. His face appeared on screen, a middle-aged human with tired eyes and a slight smile. He told that humans had a gift for this kind of war. For 10,000 years, they had fought each other in shadows, learning to move without sound and kill without warning. They had perfected the art of making enemies disappear long before they reached the stars. They had made a mistake in thinking that humans were children. Humans were predators, the most efficient predators their world had ever produced, and predators did not announce themselves before they struck. Hayes offered the same terms Admiral Price had given. Withdraw and all prisoners would be returned. Continue fighting, and the Dominion would learn just how many ships humans could take before dawn. Ended the communication without responding, but he did not give orders to continue the attack. For the first time in his 300 years of military service, High Commander was considering retreat. Outside the viewport, another ship went dark. High Commander stood before the holographic display in his command center, watching the positions of his remaining ships flicker and update. 47 vessels had now gone dark. Nearly 15,000 soldiers and crew had vanished without trace. The greatest military force the Dominion had ever sent against a single world was being dismantled piece by piece, and could do nothing to stop it. His pride would not allow retreat. 300 years of victories, 100 conquered worlds, a reputation as the Dominion's finest military commander. All of it meant nothing if he fled from primitives who had not even mastered basic energy weapons. Made his decision. If he could not defeat the humans in shadow warfare, he would deny them any shadows to hide within. The order went out to all remaining ships. Begin systematic orbital bombardment of the colony surface. Destroy every structure, every field, every possible hiding place. Reduce New Eden to bare rock if necessary. The humans wanted to fight from darkness, so would burn the darkness away. Plasma fire rained down on the colony. Agricultural facilities vanished in columns of flame. Forests that might shelter human forces were reduced to ash. Underground bunkers were targeted with penetrating munitions designed to collapse tunnel networks. Watched the destruction with grim satisfaction. Let the humans hide from this. Admiral Price responded immediately. Her 30 ships had been circling the fleet, staying just out of effective weapons range while launching boarding pods whenever opportunities arose. Now she ordered a direct attack. The human vessels accelerated toward the formation, smiled at what he perceived as desperation. 30 ships against 150 remaining warships was not a battle, it was suicide. He ordered his fleet to destroy the approaching enemy. But the human ships did not behave like any enemy that had fought before. They scattered into seemingly random patterns, changing course every few seconds, accelerating and decelerating without warning. Targeting computers were designed for enemies who moved in logical formations, who followed predictable tactical doctrines. The chaotic human approach overwhelmed their calculations. Human electronic warfare systems activated at maximum power. Suddenly, sensors showed hundreds of contacts instead of 30. False signatures appeared and disappeared across the display, each one indistinguishable from a real ship. Officers shouted conflicting targeting solutions. Weapons fire scattered across empty space while the real human vessels slipped through the confusion. Captain Brooks commanded one of the human destroyers. His ship dove directly toward a gap between two cruisers, close enough that their weapons could not track him without risking friendly fire. As he passed between them, his vessel released a cloud of boarding pods that attached to both ships before anyone realized what had happened. The chaos allowed dozens more boarding teams to reach vessels. Human soldiers cut through hull plating and disappeared inside, beginning the methodical process of clearing compartments and capturing crew. They worked in complete silence, communicating through hand signals, using weapons that made no sound and left no marks on interior walls. Watched 2 more ships go dark in rapid succession. A destroyer collided with a cruiser when both vessels lost navigation control simultaneously. A carrier's hangar bay exploded outward, destroying 40 fighter craft and leaving the ship crippled. The fleet was coming apart, and every attempt to restore order only created more opportunities for human strike teams. Vice Commander approached with a data pad showing the latest casualty figures. 22,000 had now vanished. More than a third of the original invasion force was simply gone. She informed the High Commander that several ship captains were no longer responding to orders. Some had already begun retreating toward the system's edge without authorization. Demanded to know how the humans were boarding ships whose shields remained active. Explained what intelligence officers had pieced together from sensor data. The human boarding pods were small enough to slip through gaps in the shield harmonics, tiny windows that existed in all energy barriers but were normally too small to exploit. Human engineers had apparently spent years studying captured technology, learning its weaknesses, preparing for exactly this situation. The realization struck like a physical blow. The humans had been planning this from the moment of first contact. Every diplomatic meeting, every trade negotiation, every peaceful interaction had been an opportunity to gather intelligence. While they dismissed humanity as primitive children, those children had been studying their future enemy with the patience of predators. A new alarm sounded through the flagship, Security teams reported intruders on Deck 7, then Deck 12, then the engineering section. Own ship was being boarded. He ordered his personal guards to form a defensive perimeter around the command center. Elite soldiers took positions at every entrance, weapons ready. If humans wanted to take the Dominion's pride, they would have to fight through the finest warriors they had ever produced. Minutes passed in tense silence. Reports came in from throughout the ship, crew members vanishing from duty stations, entire compartments going dark on the internal monitoring system. The humans were moving through the flagship like water through sand, impossible to stop, impossible to even locate until it was too late. Then the lights in the command center flickered. When they stabilized, Colonel Hayes was standing 10 meters from his command throne. He had appeared from nowhere, accompanied by 4 human soldiers in black armor. No one had seen them enter. No one had heard the door open. Hayes spoke quietly. He told that the war was over. Human forces had captured or disabled 63 ships. Ground forces had been reduced to fewer than 5,000 soldiers, all of whom would be captured within the day. The Dominion's invasion had failed completely. Guards raised their weapons, but Hayes made no move to defend himself. He simply waited, watching the High Commander with calm eyes that held no anger, no triumph, no emotion at all. The High Commander asked what the humans wanted. Hayes repeated the same terms that had been offered from the beginning: withdrawal, recognition of human sovereignty, return of all prisoners. He added one new condition: they would share all intelligence they possessed regarding threats in the galactic core, information that humanity knew the Dominion had been concealing from younger species. Considered ordering his guards to fire. He could kill these 5 humans easily, but he knew it would change nothing. More humans would come. They would keep coming until every in the system had vanished into their silent ships and hidden prisons. Vice Commander spoke before could respond. She informed him that she had transmitted recordings of the entire campaign to Dominion High Command. The Council would be watching. They would see whatever decision their High Commander made next. Looked at the human colonel, this small creature from a primitive world, who had brought the Dominion's mightiest fleet to its knees. He asked how humans had accomplished what no other species in history had managed. Hayes answered simply. Humans, he said, had spent their entire existence learning to survive against stronger enemies. They learned to hide, to watch, to wait, to strike at exactly the right moment. They had mistaken human politeness for weakness and human patience for inability. That mistake had cost them 22,000 soldiers and 63 warships. He offered his hand in the human gesture of agreement. The war could end now, with no more disappearances on either side, or it could continue until they had nothing left to lose. Stared at the extended hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, his crystalline skin shifting to the pale blue of acceptance, he reached out and took it. The Dominion would withdraw, and humanity would be recognized as something far more dangerous than children. The fleet from New Eden 3 days after High Commander accepted the human terms. 112 ships limped out of the system, their crews shaken and silent. They left behind the empty hulls of vessels too damaged to travel, and the memory of a defeat that would reshape galactic politics for generations. Admiral Price supervised the return of prisoners from human custody. 22,000 soldiers and crew emerged from stasis aboard hidden transport ships that had been waiting throughout the system. They were unharmed, well-fed, and completely bewildered by their experience. Many had no memory of being captured at all. One moment they had been standing guard or walking through a corridor, and the next moment they were waking up in human medical facilities. The prisoners were transferred to vessels without ceremony. Human medics provided detailed health reports for each individual, documenting the care they had received during their captivity. Not a single had been killed during the entire campaign. The humans had achieved total victory without taking a single enemy life. This fact disturbed them more than anything else. They understood conquest through destruction. They understood enemies who killed without mercy. But an enemy who could capture 22,000 soldiers without killing any of them was something entirely new. It suggested a level of precision and control that the Dominion had never encountered. High Commander returned to face the Council of Elders. He expected punishment, perhaps execution, for his failure. Instead, the Council treated him as a valuable source of intelligence. They wanted to understand what had happened at New Eden, how a species they had dismissed as primitive had dismantled one of their finest fleets. Provided detailed reports of human tactics. He described the tunnel networks and hidden sensors, the boarding pods and electronic warfare systems, the soldiers who moved like shadows and struck without warning. He emphasized that humanity had been preparing for war with the Dominion from the moment of first contact, years before any threat had been made. These were not reactions to aggression. These were plans developed by a species that had learned to assume the worst about the universe. The Council debated for weeks before reaching a decision. The Dominion would not seek revenge against humanity. Instead, they would pursue the alliance that Ambassador Cole had originally proposed. If humans could defeat the Dominion through planning and patience, perhaps they could become valuable partners against greater threats. 1 year after the Battle of New Eden, a diplomatic vessel arrived at Earth. High Commander himself led the delegation, his crystalline skin displaying the pale blue of humility that his subordinates had never expected to see. He was met at the orbital station by Ambassador Cole, Captain Brooks, and Colonel Hayes, the three humans who had orchestrated his defeat. The negotiations lasted several months and produced the Treaty of Earth, a mutual defense agreement between humanity and the Dominion. The treaty recognized human sovereignty over their existing colonies and established protocols for future expansion. More importantly, it created frameworks for intelligence sharing and joint military planning. The finally revealed what they knew about the galactic core. An ancient threat was stirring there, something that had destroyed civilizations before the Dominion existed. They had been preparing for its return for thousands of years, conquering other species to build an army large enough to face it. They had planned to add humanity to that army whether humans wanted it or not. Colonel Hayes reviewed the intelligence with human military planners. The threat was real and terrifying, but he saw something they had missed. For 12,000 years, the Dominion had been building conventional forces to fight a conventional war. They had never considered that unconventional approaches might be more effective. Humanity began sharing its own military doctrines with officers. Lessons in guerrilla warfare, psychological operations, deception, and misdirection. They found these concepts difficult to grasp. Their military tradition emphasized direct confrontation and overwhelming force. The idea of winning through confusion and fear seemed almost dishonorable. Admiral Price worked closely with her counterparts to develop new tactical frameworks. She explained that humans did not fight fair because they had never been able to afford fairness. Earth's history was written in the blood of underdogs who found ways to defeat stronger enemies. Humans had turned weakness into strategy and fear into weapon. Slowly, they began to understand. They stopped viewing humanity as fortunate primitives who had stumbled upon effective tactics. They started seeing them as something far more impressive, a species that had transformed its limitations into advantages through sheer creativity and determination. 5 years after the Treaty of Earth, the first human soldiers joined military units as advisors and trainers. They taught alien warriors how to move silently, how to read terrain, how to think like prey that had learned to hunt. The combination of technology and human cunning created something new in the galaxy, a military force that could fight any enemy through any means. High Commander visited Earth on the anniversary of the treaty signing. He stood with Ambassador Cole on a balcony overlooking a human city, watching millions of people going about their daily lives. He admitted that he still did not fully understand humanity. They seemed so ordinary, so focused on small pleasures and simple routines. It was difficult to believe these were the same creatures who had made his army disappear. Cole smiled and told him that was exactly the point. Humans did not look dangerous because they did not want to be dangerous. They wanted to build families and create art and explore the universe in peace. But when someone threatened those things, humans remembered what their ancestors had learned in the forests and plains of there. They remembered how to become invisible, how to watch and wait, how to strike from the darkness. Asked if humans would truly stand with the Dominion when the threat from the galactic core arrived, Cole assured him they would. Humanity had found something rare in the universe, a former enemy willing to become a friend. They would not abandon that friendship when it was needed most. The commander looked out at the city below and finally understood what made humans so effective. They did not fight for glory or conquest or domination. They fought for each other, for their homes and families and futures. That simple motivation, that fierce protective instinct, made them more dangerous than any species that fought for power alone. Across the galaxy, other empires heard whispers about the phantom humans who could make armies disappear. Some dismissed the stories as propaganda designed to excuse their defeat. Others sent their own diplomatic missions to Earth, hoping to establish peaceful relations before they learned the lesson the hard way. Humanity welcomed them all with open hands and friendly words. They built trade agreements and cultural exchanges and scientific partnerships. They proved themselves to be generous allies and honest negotiators. And they never let any of their new friends forget the simple truth that Ambassador Cole shared with every delegation. We wish to be your partners. We hope to be your friends. But if you force us to be your enemies, you will never see us coming. Our ancestors survived a world that tried to kill them every single day. We carry that survival in our blood, in our bones, in every cell of our bodies. We are the children of a death world, and we have learned to make the darkness itself afraid. The galaxy had new players now, small creatures from a small world who refused to accept the roles that ancient empires had assigned them. They would not be conquered. They would not be controlled. They would stand among the stars as equals, or they would drag their enemies into shadows from which there was no return. Humanity had announced itself to the universe, and the universe would never be the same.